Our next speaker is the CEO of Just Leading Solutions, a New York-based consultancy for lean and agile people operations. She helps enterprises to accelerate their agile transformation by focusing on the crucial assets, their people. She's an expert and thought leader in the area of modern HR and people operations. And when I say thought leader, I genuinely mean it. She started consulting on the contemporary HR approach 2 decades ago, when the concept of modern HR was very new, and she pioneered the topic. I had the enormous pleasure of meeting her in person and doing some training with her, and I was truly impressed how she runs it. There is no doubt she honestly believes in what she's teaching, and no doubt she's a genuine advocate of lean and agile people operations. Her passion and enthusiasm for the topic are highly contagious. Ladies and gentlemen, I am delighted to introduce Fabiola Eyholzer.
A big hello to Agile in Ireland. I wish I could be there in person, but as with so many things in 2020, we had to pivot. And the past few months have certainly been a stark reminder that we do indeed live in VUCA, in volatile, uncertain, complex and ambiguous times. And I guess we all had to be more adaptive and resilient than we ever wanted to be. And we have to continue to be so. As Darwin famously said, it's not the strongest nor the most intelligent species that is going to survive. It's the one who can adapt to change. So not just as individuals, but also as organizations, we need to embrace change, and we need to build that muscle memory for adaptability and resilience. And that's no longer a choice.
Sorry, guys, give me
it's
1
a
second,
necessity.
please. David, I'm sending you a message.
And
My
of course,
apologies.
innovation has always been the lifeblood of progressive businesses. But now, in a way, it's more important than ever. Because we're not just talking about creating new products and services. We're also talking about being creative and innovative in the way that we work, in the way that we connect with others, in the way that we learn and unlearn and relearn things, and in the way that we cultivate ideas and turn them into value, not just for our customers, but also for our employees. But as mankind, we have always been innovative and inventive, especially when we were faced with huge challenges. And throughout our history, we have always created and used tools to improve the way that we work. We started out as hunter-gatherers. We created tools that allowed us to farm the land, when in the early 1800s, we utilized the power of water and steam to create the first factories and kick us into the first industrial era. We later moved into the information or digital era, but now we're at the cusp of a new era, the augmented era. It's a time when our human capabilities, our natural capabilities, are going to be augmented by computational power, and we will work in conjunction with AI and technologies to maximize the way that we work. So think about robotics, and that is going to change the perspective of our lives and our work. And if you think about the things that are being invented and reinvented every single day, it's simply mind-blowing. Just think about biotechnology that gives us the bionic hand. It allows people with missing fingers to still have a fully functioning hand that can even handle delicate objects. And that hand is controlled by their brains and doesn't even require surgery. So technology is fundamentally going to change not just our personal lives, but also the way that we work. And yes, part of that is going to be that automation is taking over jobs. And if you're scared about that, if you're scared about the changing landscape of jobs, you're right to be scared. Because as Maurice Conti said a couple of years ago, the way that we work is going to change more in the next 20 years than it has in the past 2,000 years. But this future of work is not going to miraculously appear out of fully fledged and out of nowhere. We all have to shape it together, and we all have to figure it out together, but we don't have that much time to do it. So being creative, starting to think outside the box is something that we'll need. And this is happening whether we are ready or not. But how do we create organizations that are creative and innovative, especially in the face of constant change. How do we as leaders guide people through that change? How do we start seeing change as a chance and not as a threat? In order to understand that, we need to look at our settings, at the way that we work and the way we are embedded within our organizations. So institutions across the globe and companies across the globe are built mostly around that model of scaling efficiency. You may all have heard the metaphor of the company as well-oiled machine, as running like a Swiss clockwork. So, and it's all around that notion of how do we make sure that our work is specialized, standardized, and we can do it and run it predictably and with reliability. And it's a model that has made companies successful for decades. But the question is, what is work in that setting? So in that efficiency model, work is basically a series of minutely defined tasks. They are tightly specified and highly specialized. So that's why we have our detailed job descriptions and annual performance goals so that we have that script that we need to follow. And the thinking behind this is if every employee, every part of the organization, every job, every role does as they were instructed in a reliable and effective and efficient way, the whole organization is going to be successful. But if that's our definition of work, then definitely all jobs are going to disappear because machines will be able to do those jobs much better than we can. They don't get tired, they don't need to eat or sleep or meet others. They can do it in a way that we humans never can. And when we think about automation, we usually think about it in terms of routine jobs. So we think about the assembly line where we have a factory worker performing the same task day in, day out. And while that was true a couple of decades ago, the progress that has been made in automation and machine learning and computational power means that machines can now do jobs that we previously thought impossible for them to take over. Jobs that we always thought will need a human. So some of these examples come out of the gig economy. So if you think about Uber drivers or taxi or buses or rideshare drivers, those jobs are going to disappear with self-driving cars. If you think about jobs like translators, today the machine learning has made such a huge improvement that translations and real-time translations get better by the day. But other things like accounting services, paralegal services, all these jobs are vulnerable to automation. Guess what? Even jobs like a doctor, jobs that we never thought would be automated, are vulnerable. Today, a system can tell you whether or not a freckle is cancerous more accurately than a leading dermatologist. And of course, they are not trying to copy the intuition and the experience of a doctor, but instead they are running a pattern of algorithms and recognition patterns by going through over 100,000 cases to hunt for those similarities that allow the machine to decide whether or not something is whether or not the lesion is cancerous. And it's performing these tasks in an inhumane way. There is no way a doctor can learn from more than 100,000 cases in the same time span as the machine can. But there is also a silver lining to all of this, because that whole automation progress is also coinciding with a new age in our human history, a new age in our economy. So economies always get labeled by the work that people predominantly do within those economies. So when we started out as farmers, so we were in the agriculture economy, we moved into factories and from factories into office buildings. You might say we started out as hired backs, we became hired hands, and then hired brains. We've all heard the term of knowledge workers. And of course, it's not just changing where we work, but also how we work and how we create value for the organization and for society. But now we're at the cusp of a new economy, the human economy. And you might say it's all about hired hearts. But what does that mean? What does it mean to hire hearts, or in other words, to humanize work? We are now at a point in our time where we really have to think about what work are we humans intensely good at? What is the type of work that we alone are uniquely positioned and qualified for? And that is work that requires creativity and imagination and curiosity and passion and ideation and all that social and emotional intelligence and our life experience that we bring to the table. Because no computer can take that away from us. So how do we create an organization that works around that, that leverages what only we can bring to the table? What is the strength that we can bring to the table? And John Hagel, who influenced my thinking in this era, he said it's time for, or most of the jobs are going to emerge in 3 categories: artists, mentors, and composers. So artists are people who are creative and unique craftsmen people. So that might be your software developer or product engineer. Whereas mentors are people who are great at coaching and leading others, who are great at inspiring and guiding and helping other people reach their potential. So that might be your agile coaches and your people developers. And then we have the composers, people who can create unique and meaningful experiences. That might be your marketing specialist or employee journey designer. And what John Hagel says is that every one of us has the potential to thrive in one of those categories, because every single one of us brings passion and drive to the workplace. Now, if you think that your people or your employees don't have that kind of passion, just look at what they are doing on the weekends, on their time off. I bet you they have a lot of passion and drive for whatever they are doing when they are not at work. And we want to bring that into our workspace as well. But that means we need to change our institutional agenda. We need to start thinking about creativity and innovation and creating the type of organizations that can explore, that can think outside the box. Because the times when we were knowledge workers is gone. Today it's no longer about teaching knowledge and learning knowledge. Today is about teaching us and being able to continue to learn, to unlearn and relearn new things. And we need that outside the box thinking, because efficiency is only going to get us this far. Yes, efficiency is going to make sure that we don't have waste in the process, that we are lean, that we are ensuring that we are getting better at what we are doing. But the problem is, and I'm quoting Oren here, who illustrated that really well when he said the electric light bulb did not come from the continuous improvement of candles. So that ability to think outside the box is vital. And executives and organizations understand that we need to be innovative, that that's part of our growth strategy, and that we're going to disappear if we cannot keep up. Especially now that we're faced with more challenges at a faster pace than ever before. And companies recognize that, but the reality is that only about 6% of executives say, hey, we're actually doing a good job. We are innovative. We are going with times and we are creating new stuff. We're thinking outside the box. But why is it that organizations find it so hard to innovate? They have great intentions. They have great purpose. They have amazing people. They have a lot of energy in the organization. And still, they fall short. And there are a lot of things that need to happen for innovation to take place in an organization. And it starts by changing our mindset. And I'm showing you this quote, and it's a mock quote. It's not a real quote, but it might as well be, that said, and it's quoting, pretending to quote a CFO who says, hey, I encourage creativity and I'm a huge supporter of innovation, as long as this has a positive return on investment, proven results, and doesn't distract us from our core business. And that's exactly the thinking that we see in so many organizations. But the problem with innovation is innovation doesn't happen just by chance. Innovation needs to be on the institutional agenda to actually happen. And there are a lot of different things that we need to consider. And here are a couple of things that I want to share with you that we call the innovation playbook. So the first one is we need to understand that innovation starts small, not big. You're not going to walk into the office Monday morning, have the great idea, and that's going to shape the future of your organization. Innovation starts small. And a study looked into the top 50 game-changing innovations over the past 100 years. And what they found out is that 80% were actually sparked by someone whose primary expertise was outside the field in which the innovation took place. Just think about penicillin that was invented by Alexander Fleming in 1928, but it wasn't until Ernst Hein, a chemist, actually turned it into a miracle drug about 20 years later. So we need to understand that innovation starts with small ideas, people leveraging ideas of each other, and from there you can continue building on it. And the reality is that before you can have innovation, we need creativity. If we don't allow people to think outside the box, we're not going to get there. So how do we create a space where people can be creative? Where do we have time for creativity? Do we shut down new ideas as leaders, or do we encourage that? And especially right now, as we're working virtually, this is even more challenging because we need to be in the same space. We need to, whether it be virtually or in person, where we can leverage ideas of each other, where we can be creative together, because that's how we start building a muscle for innovation. And I predict that going back, once we are allowed to go back to the office, that office space is still going to be needed, but it's not going to be needed for people to sit in their cubicle and have their heads down and just work on whatever they are working on. Office space is going to become that collaborative, innovative space where we bring people together to brainstorm, to work together, to explore, to experiment. So we need to create those spaces, again, whether it's virtual or in an office space, to make that happen. And if we don't allow for creativity, we're never going to get innovation. And the other part is, without learning, there is no innovation. And learning is not just about sharing knowledge. This is also about building that learning muscle, that adaptability, that flexibility, and that potential for change, because we will have to unlearn and relearn and transfer knowledge and experiences at such a fast pace that we can't wait for training courses and classroom learning to catch up. So we really have to embed learning into our workflow. So micro-learning needs to happen, and we need to give people the time and space to learn. And this is not just about we as an organization making sure that we teach knowledge to people. No, this is also about the job enrichment workout, where people actually teach something to a colleague or take over something a colleague is doing. So sharing that knowledge, because when you teach something to someone else, you continue to learn. So it's nurturing that neuroplasticity that we all need for change. And Pollard once said, learning and innovation go hand in hand. And the arrogance of success is to think that what we did yesterday will be sufficient for tomorrow. And I guess that has never been more true than it is today. You know, as a kid, you usually got the question, what do you want to do when you grow up? And while those jobs are typically very fun, so we have anything from pro athlete to police person or artist, and some say anything from mattress tester to mermaid doctor, so it's really fun to hear all these things. But the problem is that the jobs that we're going to do tomorrow haven't even been invented yet. The Institute for Future and Dell predicted that 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 have not even been invented yet. So chances are you could be something like a human technology integration specialist or a nanomedic. So all these jobs are happening, and that means learning has to happen all the time. It's not a choice. We have to keep at it, and we have to continue to reinvent ourselves. And the other part is that is part of the learning journey is there is no innovation, no creativity without failure. And there is no way around it. And I know I'm going back to my financial guy who says, hey, I'm not going to invest in failure. Well, guess what? If you want to have innovation, failure is just part of the journey. And you're not investing in stuff that people just do wrong because they haven't thought about it. They're not talking about that kind of failure. But if we experiment, if we start thinking outside the box, something is going to go wrong, something is going to happen, and we need to cater to that. So the question is, how do we build an environment, especially as leaders, where people feel safe to fail, where they feel they can experiment, they can come up with new ideas, they can test it, and deliver that value so that we understand this is a stepping stone of what we are doing. And leaders take on an important role in all of that. So whether you are a people manager or leader within your own organization or part of a team, we all can help to shape a culture of innovation. So if we start to listen actively and increase the dialogue, if we start to empower people, if we make sure that we allow people to think outside the box and we don't shut down every single idea that they have, we are starting to create that learning environment. And especially as leaders, it is up to us to decide what is the priority. So what is the backlog? Are enough learning and micro-learning and people topics on that backlog so that we can ensure that innovation happens? And we have to stop thinking just in terms of efficiency. And there is a lot that we need to do to create what we call a talent factory. And the name factory is not by chance. So we need to start by redefining the word talent. You know, in the efficiency model, we talk about high potentials and high talent people. But in this new world, in this more ecosystem, we think about talent in a different way. And we believe every single person in the organization is a talent. Every single one of us brings unique experiences, unique skills, imagination and passion to the table, and we need to leverage that. So, and this is not just about hiring for potential and cultural fit. When we talk about potential, this is not about hiring people who can take the next step in a predefined career trajectory. This is about hiring people who can flex their muscles, who can live in that fast-paced, agile world, who no matter what life or work throws at them, they can flex their muscles and they feel comfortable with the uncertainty that comes with fast pace. And that really start having that mindset of solutions. We're looking at solutions, not the problem. We are looking at embracing change as a chance and not as a threat. And we have to start embracing that. Going back to what we were saying earlier about humanizing work. So if we embrace what makes us human, that's what we can leverage. We can leverage the power of the team, and we want to start building on the strength of people. This is no longer about finding the small faults and penalizing them in our performance evaluations at the end of the year. No, we work with people, we engage in talent enablement, in continuous growth and in a personalized way, so that allows us to build on the strength of each person. Because again, each one of us brings something unique to the table, and we can leverage that. So if you're a manager, if you're a leader in your team, make sure to understand what are the strengths of people, especially as we talk about new workforce dynamics. We need different people with different backgrounds, with different experiences and different skills in our teams to be creative, to leverage those different ideas. Because if we've all gone through the same training, if we're all coming from the same background, same university, same career profile, we are limiting ourselves with the ideation that we could do if we would leverage diversity of thought. And we need to continuously invest in learning and growth. So learning really has to be embedded into the workflow. It has to be deeply embedded in the way we approach work. And we have to create those unique employee experiences. We have to give people that purpose back to make things happen. And every single one of us has a role to play in creating that type of organization, an organization where people can thrive, where people feel that they can be themselves and still have learning and growth opportunities. But of course, none of that change is easy. So it takes a lot of courage to face that complexity and really challenge our mindset behind it. And that's one of the key aspects. If we continue talking about efficiency and meritocracy and pay for performance, we are not creating the type of agile ecosystem that we're hoping we're creating. And I understand that most executives and leaders, they want to have both. So when we talk about these things, they get that in order to be more resilient and more innovative, they need to be more flexible. They need to be more adaptive. They need to empower people. They need to have self-organizing and autonomous teams, or at least aligned autonomous teams. But they still want to focus on efficiency. They still want to have meritocracy and pay for performance. But here is the problem. You can either have one or the other, but you can't have both. Because scaling efficiency is certainly giving way to scaling learning. And I can only repeat myself, we have to learn faster than ever before. And we have to co-create faster than ever before. And of course, change and transformation like that is always hard. And we all know that the ecosystem and that the corporate system is going to kick in and fight you along the way. So the immune system and antibodies are going to kick in and scream and they don't necessarily want to change. So, but we still need to drive that change. We need to understand what's our underlying mental model. How do we address that? How do we change that? And how do we lead the way? And there are a lot of things that you as a leader can do. You don't have to wait for the whole organization or your HR or anyone else to help you along the way. You can start being more creative. You can start thinking outside the box within your given setting and inspire others to do the same. Because we want to build on that strength of people, because people have a huge potential and we want to leverage it, and we need it more than ever. We need to start building those connections to each other, especially now that we're working in a virtual setting, to make things happen. So ask yourself, what environment can you create that allows for creativity, that allows for ideation? What are your leadership and people and HR processes and tools? Do they help you to stimulate innovation and learning, or do they hinder you? How can you adapt them so that you can have a different perspective on organizations and really create that learning and innovative space for people, a space that people can thrive in? And because going forward, we need that human imagination and creativity. And we need it from every single person in our organization. And I'm using Alan Turing's words here. He said, sometimes it is the people no one imagines anything of who do the things that no one can imagine. So if we want to continue to thrive as organizations, that's where we have to start. Let's humanize work. Let's make sure we leverage everything that we as individuals bring to the table, our imagination and passion and creativity and drive. And that's how we leverage it. And by the way, it's more fun working in that way. I don't have to tell you, you're all working in Agile organization. So you know how important it is. And I know it's scary to shape this future of work, and innovation and the future of work go hand in hand, because we're both trying to stay responsive and up to speed. We leverage it, and it's a scary future, but it's also a future full of opportunities and chances. It's a future where we can actually experiment. There's never been a better time to explore and to experiment than right now. because there is no going back. We're not going to get out of this pandemic and do things the same way we've done before. We are in that accelerated phase of change, and we need to face change. But if we do, we all have a bright future ahead of us. And this is exciting and exhilarating to really shape the future and the future of work. Thank you.
Thank you, Fabiola, for this fantastic talk. And I would like to encourage everybody to pause. On the right-hand side, you have a panel. There's above the discussion forum, there is a live Q&As. If you can pose some questions, please do so. I will scan through them and we'll ask Fabiola those. And we already have some questions coming. So Fabiola, I've heard you talking a lot. We've heard you talking a lot about learning. However, the reality is that more and more companies driving decision from fear, they freeze the budgets on spent on training, learning, and so on. What's the trend? How do you see what do you see out there? How the companies overcome that in the current times?
Yes, it's quite interesting what we see. You're absolutely right. Some companies, the first budget that they cut was in learning. But then we saw other companies, especially agile companies, who said, no, this is actually a chance for us to learn more and to dig in deeper. And yes, there are certain things that are easier when you have a bigger budget, when you can work on stuff, but there are other stuff that you can do yourself. So how many spike stories or learning stories do you have in your backlog, in your team backlogs? How do you leverage things like hiring hackathons across the whole value stream? So there is a lot of stuff that you can do where you can encourage learning, job enrichment programs. All of these things don't require an extra budget.
Okay, thank you very much. And we have two questions which I think they are a little bit linked to what you said. So one is, sorry, it's a jumping, so I lost it. How to set up a learning environment in the company when you do not have a support from the management. Is it even possible to do it?
Of course, it's always better when you have your management support, your leader support. But this is also about starting out with creativity, or do things like pair programming in an IT setting. So there are so many different things that you can do, and no wonder it's micro-learning that is really taking on. How do we embed learning into our workflow? How do we make sure we have the time and space to learn? And sometimes it's just about watching a 5-minute video. Sometimes it's about attending a 2-day conference, like we have in this setting, where you can exchange ideas and thoughts and experiences with others. But let's really look at what can we do as individuals. Is there something that I'm really good at that I could teach someone else on the team? Or is there something that a task or a story that I typically take on that someone else can learn to do? And these are the things that the teams, that the self-organizing team, can do on their own. They don't need approval from a manager on how do they share their knowledge, their experience with others. And when you teach something to someone else, you learn too. So this is not just about the learning for the other person, it's also about your own learning and growth journey.
Exactly, thank you very much. And a comment from Kevin. Kevin, nobody else can see your comment. So if you want to share that everybody see, you have to use discussion forum, but I will read it out. So great points, Fabiola. People, leadership and culture agenda finally catching up. The complexity experience through Agile. Okay. And another question, do you have any concrete examples where you set up the learning environment in a company and how people reacted to it?
So one of the cases that you see is from IBM. They have Micah. Micah is a learning bot. So, and every employee has to do about 12 hours of micro-learning every year. So in the morning when you start up your laptop, Micah's going to come up and say, hi, Joanna, I haven't seen you in a while. Here is a 2-minute video about innovation. Do you want to watch it? And then you can say, oh, yes, this is really cool. Let me just watch it. It's 2 minutes. I'm going to invest that. Or you can say, oh, remind me later. So it's bringing in that gamification aspect into the learning. And that's really helping people to improve, and you get to know what did others like who are in similar positions or who have similar roles. And the bot is obviously learning and can make better suggestions to you. And by gamifying it and implementing it into the workflow, you're encouraging learning.
Thank you. And we have another great question, which I think will be relevant to many people who are, sitting on the fence. So the question is, the SEO is about the finances. So the SEO still needs to do their job. So it is about profit, it's about bottom line, it is. So how can management direct this powerful innovation to focus on the top business priorities?
So I started my career in finance. I'm a data galator. I love these questions. The challenge that we have when it comes to investment is that accounting is just black and white. It's a plus column, it's a minus column. We don't differentiate between good and bad costs. So, and you see that play out in the budgeting rounds all the time. So when you talk about budgets, what's a good budget number? Well, if you hit 100% of your budget, then you've done a great job. We are not asking, hey, could you have achieved the same thing with 80% of the budget? Or should you have really invested 120% and really created something substantial for the future? And it's the same with investment in innovation, investment in learning, creativity, and innovation. It takes time to build. And if you never make that investment up front, you're never going to reap the benefits. Because innovation is not going to happen out of nowhere. It's not, hey, now we need the great new idea. So we have to invest in that. And I know that finance folks, the quote that I showed you, they don't want to invest in something that you say, hey, we don't know what it's going to be like, what the result is going to be. We're going to experiment. They get really nervous when they hear the term experimentation. But that's how we learn. That's how we are getting better. And if we don't invest in that, we are not going to make things happen. So if you can allocate a certain percentage of your time prior to your planning, so that you can say, okay, this is 5% of our time we're going to spend on micro-learning, on creativity, then you can build that in. And it's going to come from your OPEX. So there is no extra budget for it needed.
Okay. Thank you very much. I think this is, finances, bottom line, return on investment is quite popular because we have few questions on that. So I hope everybody is happy. I think like you explained that, exactly what it is, there are no miracles there, isn't it? So I think we have time for the last question, and my apologies, guys, I have it highlighted and it jumped up. Okay, so how to measure a culture of innovation to help us understand when we are on that journey? Do you have any tips?
Yes, so watch out for those signs or missing signs of innovation. So if you're a leader, just think about how creative are people when they approach, when they deliver, when they co-deliver, when they co-create. Do I see new ideas come up, or are they just rehashing the same thing over and over again? Those are signs for either an innovation culture or a missing innovation culture. So watch out for these signs. Watch out for how much learning is taking place. Are people sharing knowledge? All of these are going to help you see, are we on the right track, or do we need to course correct? And here is the thing, you can drive that yourself. So how can you ask the right questions to your people, or how can you challenge your own team to say, hey, but that's what we've always done. Could we do something different? And by doing that, you're playing your own part. And if everyone plays their part, then we can really shape that culture of innovation.
Lovely. Thank you very much. I'm very conscious of the time. However, there was a very interesting comment on the discussion forum, guys, at 409, and Steve was sharing how he uses scientific method in discussion and his approach to innovation. So please, we won't have time to discuss it now, but please, if you're interested in it, have a look. It was around 9 minutes past 4, the comment was shared. Fabiola, thank you very much for your time. It was, as usual, a great pleasure to have you. And for the rest of you, please, thanks for your time and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.